Firefly flies again at long last. A semi-private Chinese company seeks to rival Starlink. Does that now mean 2 million satellites in orbit? Trump's FAA is backing off on a rule curbing a firm's ability to leave rocket bodies in orbit. FCC is weighing whether to let a firm, launch huge solar mirrors to blast sunlight on cities at night. Although Pyongyang might like that. Two companies are betting that expendable halves might be a great first start on the moon. Did Starlink just do a bait and switch for general aviation? A company called Lux Aeterna raised $10 million to build a reusable satellite. I asked last week whether we needed to unleash Jared Isaacman, or given the recent Artemis decisions a week or so ago, is this an example of what an unleashed Isaacman looks like? Well, apparently the Hill thinks it knows the answer. And Fortune says, and this is our topic tonight, that for SpaceX to be valued at $1.75 trillion, it's going to have to out-earn Berkshire Hathaway, at least. All that, plus our guest, Shubber. From the news desk, the Center for Space Commerce and Finance, my name is Thomas Andrew Olson, and this is The Unknown Quantity. As you know, this show is brought to you by the Center for Space Commerce and Finance. What do? We champion and strengthen emerging space startups and space exchanges to enterprises worldwide. Our pitch events are world-class boot camps fortify startups to be better investor ready. Now, a lot of our work, especially this podcast, is supported by our listeners and fans like you. So remember, the Center is a 501c3 nonprofit. So just go to our website, cscf.space/support. Click that donate button and drop something in the tip jar. In addition, if you like this show, if you support this show, tell your friends. The more subscribers, the merrier. Thank you so much. Now, my oldest space friend, Michael Lane, who just disentangled himself from the endless knot, is here with me. Michael, come on in, man.
Hey, how are you?
How you doing? You were under the weather the other night.
Yeah. I had a doctor's appointment that kind of kicked my ass a little bit. Nothing big. It's actually just follow-up from 2 years ago, but still little rough on me, a little bit.
All right.
So sorry about that. Yeah, sorry.
No problem. I just got wrenched around by the chiropractor the other day. I'm still feeling it. Man. I only go about once a month for just a tune-up. It's like, right, he really was hard this the other day. Like, man, it's like, it's worth it. Hurts so good, man. It's worth it. Yeah.
PT for me yesterday. Always tough. Always a bit of a workout, but that's what they're there for. So Good. You feeling good?
Yeah. Feeling pretty good. Okay. What's the first thing? Well, the first one's a real quickie. Oh yeah. Here's Wes. Hi, Wes.
Wes
is
morning.
The house.
Wrong.
Welcome, guys. We could have a fun night tonight, man. So Firefly finally flew.
Yay.
Felicitously.
Yeah. Love those guys. Want to see them succeed. They have caused a bit of doubts in the industry about whether they can really pull off their goals. So I'm really pleased to see them. I'm always rooting for them.
Absolutely. They had something to prove. And so they had a little pressure on them. So I'm glad they a lot of eyes were on them today. So I'm glad it worked out.
Yeah.
And it's the first Block 2 that they're flying. So it finally did. 97 feet tall was that's not much bigger than the one Alan Shepard flew on. in 61. You know what I mean? It's
Right, right. C- Compare that to the 400-foot behemoth trying to
yeah,
launch off of Texas. But good on them, right?
yeah,
Uh,
yeah. They
yeah,
well, actually, true. That's true. Yeah, they pushed back their launch date a little bit.
yeah,
Like, it's you only get one shot at doing your new version right. So I guess pulling it back makes a lot of sense.
sure.
And
Yeah,
there's a lot of eyes on him too. Musk too. So we'll be talking about that. That's going to be a big topic of our show tonight.
yeah.
It's with our
Yeah.
guest. So here we
I,
go.
I did think it was interesting that Lockheed Martin has a demonstrator payload on it, which I think I would like to know more about that. You know, given where ULA is today, uh, you would think they'd steer some cargo to their sister company.
Right.
But yeah, so I would have liked to have heard a little bit more about what their demonstrator payload is, but that's all we got.
Yeah.
That's all we got.
That's all we got. That's all we got. Well, anyway, here's the thing, because we talked about this a few weeks ago. Because they're going to the international tribunal and saying, yeah, I want to put up 100,000 satellites,
Right.
let's say, and then China said, well, we want to do it too, and now it's becoming 1 million. We don't know, and we're gonna go into that later. But here's a Shanghai government-backed satellite internet startup. Say that 3 times fast. And they're raising fresh capital, and they're going to deploy thousands of low Earth orbit satellites, betting that demand for communications. They want to rival Starlink is what they want to do.
Okay, sure.
And so I guess, well, we don't normally, in our business and what we do, we usually say, yeah, the more the merrier. Isn't that great?
Right.
I try to be less sanguine about that when you talk about the sheer numbers.
We don't know how big this one is, right? We don't know how big this one is. A couple months ago, they talked about not one but 200,000 satellite constellations.
Mm-hmm.
Is this the same? Is this a different one? Are they going after the million number that just got populated? It was not that long ago. Maybe, yeah, it was 2020. 2020, I was doing a lot of online conferences then, and the Satellite Industry Association, there was talk about 60,000 satellites. And we had a guest from the Satellite Industry Association, and they're like, look, wait. A lot of those are paper satellites. They're never going to fly, but they are taking up bandwidth for the regulation organizations, and there's multiple. And their official position was that maybe 40,000 of them would fly. And this is a 6-year ago estimate that 40,000 would fly. We're already north of 13, 15 is easily in sight.
Mm-hmm.
40 doesn't seem that big anymore, but it was revelatory back just 5 years ago.
Right. Well, just 8 or 10 years ago, there's only 1,000 satellites flying around the Earth, and now there's 10,000 plus, and most of them are owned by one guy.
Right. One company. Important to note, it's not a guy; it's a company. Yep. Right. But yeah, I don't know what to do with 1 million satellites. Right. We're tracking 1 million from SpaceX, 88,000 from StarCloud, God knows how many others. Is there a path where if both Chinese or all 3 Chinese programs come online, is there a path for 1.5 million satellites? At that point, why don't you just build a ring around the Earth and start your Dyson sphere, right? Like,
yeah, I get it. It's Ring World or something. It's kind of weird because 90% of their orbit is over nothing that will pay them, and then you have to do a handoff like every few minutes just to keep a customer satisfied somewhere.
Yeah.
And so this is kind of mildly insane, and but people think they're going to make crap tons of money out of it. So, and for now, maybe they're right. But when last I checked, Starlink only has 9 million customers, and they're gaining at the rate of like 10,000 a month or something.
Right.
But it's still 9 million customers. You know, every time you worry about what Avialto is going to do next, okay, I got plenty of time. I don't have to worry about it. He's only got 9 million customers. We could get those in a few. We could get some of those in a few years from people who can't afford him. So okay, you know, he doesn't have 1 billion customers. I'd be a little concerned if he had 1 billion customers.
Yeah. I'm actually asking the AI because I thought the number was a little bit higher. All right, Starlink currently has 9 million active.
I keep the page live on my feed just so I can refresh it once in a while. So I could have sent you the link if you didn't.
9 million users, 155 countries, and adding 20,000 new customers a day.
It's 20,000 now.
20,000
in the original article. But yeah.
Holy cow. That's gigantic. I did not know it was that big. Good on them. Good for them.
Okay. So now
my best friend just signed up with it about 3 months ago. He was not super impressed, but it's a start.
Okay. All right. So you see stuff like that, and then you wonder what the regulatory guys are doing, because apparently Trump's FAA is backing off a rule that's aimed at stopping commercial space companies from leaving rocket bodies in Earth orbit.
Right.
And so this is the big space junk, and they were trying to find a way to curb that practice. Actually, they first proposed that measure like 3 years ago,
right?
And hoping of curbing the junkyard of debris, but it would have required companies like SpaceX to safely remove such spacecraft within 25 years of launch.
Yeah.
So you keep that dead booster up there for 25 years. So it's not like a huge regulation.
Right.
Although I think if our friend Kwang Han K could
deorbit
come up with his deorbit system, it might be sooner. They need to have a chat.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently their example is a Falcon 9 that re-entered over the Northwest in 2021 and dropped a tank on a farm.
Right. It did.
In eastern Washington somewhere.
It got some attention here locally. Yeah.
So, but not that long ago, a month ago, the FAA just nixed the whole rule, saying the agency needs more time to research it. So, I don't know. I mean, at least make the attempt.
Yeah. So that was a Biden era decision to try to start cleaning up some of the junk there, which I think that's a pretty good plan. But one of the things that keeps coming up in kind of private conversations lately is, what if you didn't send it back home? What if you made an actual graveyard, not a graveyard orbit, but somehow, and I'm just making stuff up here, right?
Sure.
But just kind of confine it, bring it into a big ass net, and just leave it there. Would that ultimately be better? Because at the end of the day, there are companies that are trying to figure out how to do refining and smelting of resources on orbit. We had Lee Steinke from Sisler Industries on our show 6 months ago. They have melted stuff into slag and reformed it.
Yeah.
So maybe what we should do instead of deorbiting it, which has its own problems, maybe we should figure out how to collect all that stuff, collect all the stuff that's coming off the ISS, because there's a lot of trash coming off of ISS every week, every month, every year. I think there should be a recycling program on orbit now. I think we have enough that justifies it. So
Yep.
Yeah.
Pick your part in space, a great new business opportunity.
Right? Exactly. I'll run the Leo salvage yards. Stand for the sun. Exactly.
That's it. Oh
Yeah.
my God. Yeah, they made a movie about that. I think some Korean film crew made a movie about that. Some motley crew of people that's what they did was it's called Space Sweepers. And
Yeah.
that's
Right.
all they did. They just
Right.
cleaned up junk.
Right.
And they
Yep.
weren't but it got to the point where no one even cared about it. They've been up there doing it so long and just cleaning up stuff. Oh yeah, these are like the janitors.
Right.
And
Sure.
you
Sure.
treat them accordingly.
Right.
It's yeah.
Yeah.
It was kind of funny. They had some funny moments to it.
On the bits. Yep. Right.
Yep. Okay. But then, not to be outdone,
Right.
the FCC is now also in the business, because remember, I think we talked about this a while back. Some guys were trying to launch some satellites, so just big mirrors,
Right.
and they would reflect sunlight onto cities at night.
Right.
Nothing could go wrong
What
with it.
could possibly go wrong with that?
Well, again, Pyongyang might like it,
Right.
because North Korea, you see those pictures. There's
dark
like
at
no
night,
lights in North
right?
Korea at night.
Right. Yep.
None. Maybe just that would save them a lot of money
Right.
and a lot of development time. Maybe they should be investing in this company to do that. But the FCC, I don't know why they're controlling this, is actually considering it.
Sure.
It's instead of just saying on its face, this is ridiculous. No, everything's no. But they're going to do it anyway.
Like
Reflect Orbital.
this is the first time I've seen them throw a price, right? So they want to synchronize and point their reflectors at solar farms. It's not about like it's not like your street level in your local neighborhood or your HOA needs to approve it. It's to power solar panel arrays that are dark at night. And so they're like, look, just pay us $5,000 an hour. We'll send sunlight at your site. And so the idea is they'll make more than $5,000 off of their solar panels at night because they're not producing anything.
Is there an environmental aspect to this, though?
You know damn well there is.
Yeah, of course, because we have these things. There's these things crawling around out there called nocturnal animals.
Right.
And they kind of need the darkness to live.
Right.
That's where they hunt.
Right.
Or do what they do. If they're slugs, I don't know what they do.
Right.
But there are all sorts of critters out there that are usually out there at night for a very specific ecology reason, because every critter has a purpose, whether you like it or not,
right?
In an ecosystem. And so I'm concerned about that. I'm concerned about nocturnal birds like owls flying into that thing and going, wait a minute.
You lived in the Pacific Northwest when we had the spotted owl crisis, right?
Oh, God. They'll get me
yeah. I mean, there were people murdered over that bird.
Yes.
Murdered over it.
Yep.
Yeah.
They're spiking the trees, and the guy lost his arm or something because he put a chainsaw into it.
Yeah.
And ripped him to shreds. Yeah.
Yeah. Joe Luttrell from our channel is weighing in. He's like, bats will suffer for sure. We have a lot of light pollution right now as it is. All right. So, Joe, let's just take that for a second, right? About 5 years ago, I was given a lecture, and it was to kids. And I said, go outside tonight and look up at the night sky. Just look up at the night sky and try to remember it. Because if you go out tomorrow night, it's going to be different. And if you go out 3 nights from now, it's going to be different. And that was 5 years ago.
Right.
So if we wind up in a world where we have a million, or make up a number, 1.5 million satellites encircling the sky, the night sky that we grew up with is not going to be the same. And that light pollution that we already have from all of our cities is also going to be happening in our orbits.
And it doesn't matter, even if those beautiful pictures of the Milky Way from the middle of the Atacama Desert, let's say, it's not going to matter.
Yep.
Because they're going to have the same problem. The satellites are going to be flying over.
I was 19 years old on a ship in the middle of Japan and Korea, and the captain turned off the lights on purpose. He warns everybody in advance, and you could go out onto the deck, and I'd never seen so many stars in my life. Right, we're hundreds of miles from each side. The Japan and China, Japan and Korea, and it was astounding. I got dizzy looking up at all the stars, but that's not going to be available.
Right. That happened to me too. I was living in Nepal for a while. And, in the 70s, and there's in the village there's like, the only light you had was a lantern or something, and so you just saw everything.
Right. Yeah. Reflect Orbital is going to get all the poets angry at them.
Yes.
Right? I mean, I know the poet lobby is not as strong as it used to be, but the spotted owls and the poets, they're going to be up in arms. I hope that they're up in arms. Yeah. So we'll see what happens with these guys. I don't want to throw shade at any space company, but I don't love this plan.
Mm-hmm.
I don't love this plan.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, all right. So there's a couple of outfits. Voyager and MaxSpace apparently are getting into the idea of expandable habitat technology. Basically inflatables,
Yep.
And so they haven't gotten the official word from NASA that we're going to do this as a policy, but they're still betting ultimately that they will, and they're putting money into it and building stuff for to show and for testing. So I thought that was kind of interesting.
I can't remember her name, but one of our guests was probably 8 or 9 months ago was from MaxSpace, and I was a little skeptical. I was hopeful, but a little skeptical. So it is kind of nice to see that they're starting to kind of make some progress. Yeah. I long believed that inflatables had a role on the moon. Yeah. I think that's the easiest thing to start.
Bigelow kind of showed them the way.
Absolutely. So, hats off to those folks. Yeah. And Max actually, that's how they got started. Was they started with Bigelow Technology because it was their folks that taught Bigelow how to do it, and so they just repurposed the tech.
Right. Next up, there's here's a weird kind of a story because General Aviation is accusing Starlink of doing a bait and switch for their pricing on certain services that they've used for general aviation, and it says they did a pricing shift, and but it was used to be an affordable and functional way for general aviation aircraft to have reliable broadband at altitude, and apparently that's been diminished overnight because they abruptly restructured how it works, and I guess they're just jacking their prices quite a bit. It went, from 50 to 165 a month with reasonable data allowances, but it allowed them to stay connected above 100 miles an hour up to 400 miles an hour. Now they've imposed a 100 mile an hour in motion cap on all non-aviation plans. And for true in-flight use, they must migrate to a new aviation-specific tier. And so now it's like 1,000 per month, 450 mile an hour tier instead of the 250 it used to be, and with meager data. And everyone is screaming about this. It looks like we started out as a breakthrough for connectivity, enabling real-time weather, digital flight tools, route updates, even communication with family is now cost prohibitive for most pilots.
I think that's a pretty good argument for what's Blue's new Amazon's new tool. It's called Amazon Leo or something like that.
Yeah.
I would say that's what competition's about,
Yep,
y'all.
absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, our time is running short, but I have a couple of things just real quickly. Um, a Colorado company called Lux Eterna raised 10 million to develop what they call reusable satellites. And they believe the future of the space economy will be built on fleets that return to Earth reliably and relaunch almost instantly. That could be, they say it could be as transformative as reusable rockets.
Huh. I confess, I've not really given that idea very much thought, so I'm going to think about that this week.
Yep. Well, they're guessing, they're betting that, it's not just the cost of building a satellite, it's the supply chain and the capital expenditure.
Right. Yep.
But if you can bring something back, refurb it, and send it up again.
I think that's a really interesting idea. My gut reaction is it's interesting. Planet Labs revolutionized the industry with a design and rebuild of a new iteration satellite about every 7 to 9 months. When they were first getting started, that was an unheard of throughput rate. Now they're 8 years old or something like that, and they kind of set that standard that everybody else is taking for granted. Like the Henry Ford version of satellite manufacturing. Whoops. And that's good, right? Like that already turned manufacturing on its head. So the idea of having a satellite deorbit, find it, bring it back to the factory, put a new chip in it, put a new comm set in it. Maybe. I don't think the bus is the expensive part of that satellite, though. I don't know that you save that. I don't know. I'm gonna have to look into this. I'm totally spitballing. I'm gonna just shut up and just let this unfold.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. Because if you can make an argument for that, you can make an argument for refurbing satellites in a private commercial space station on orbit and not have to bring it down. And they just rent a space on one of the VAST modules and do it up there. And just redeploy. Whoop, here you go.
Right.
You're back.
Right. Yeah.
Yep. Delta V has entered the chat. Dallas has entered the chat. Joe Bistritto is here. And he says it's not a coincidence that the speed limit for general aviation use of Starlink happened right before the war with Iran started. And 2 weeks after they disabled a lot of Russian Starlinks in Ukraine. So, okay. That's interesting.
The Illuminati is alive and well, and Musk is the chairman.
Yep. Yeah. Well, our other Joe says it's better to refurb in space. So I think I've got no. Well, we have a couple last things, real quickly. I said that I used to say that we weren't sure if the Artemis thing was actually the unleashing of Jared Isaacman. Apparently, the Hill thinks so.
I'm just going to show off Doug Plata's link here for a second because I want to see this. I'm going to look at this after the show, Doug. But the idea of a 100-ton surface inflatable, that's a dream come true.
Yeah, it would be.
I'm going to follow that up afterwards.
Absolutely. So I left that link for everybody to look at because I thought it was.
Oh, it wasn't Joe. It was Doug.
Yeah,
sorry,
no problem.
It was Doug. Credit
Yep. And finally, I just want to get this in quickly because this leads to our guest. The Fortune article that says to justify a $1.5 trillion market cap after its IPO, SpaceX would need to earn more than Berkshire Hathaway. And then they go on to describe why that might be unlikely. And we could even refer to that if you want during our conversation. We can.
Yeah, let's give it a little bit of context, though. So it would be the second highest total valuation to Saudi Aramco, and way higher than third place, which would then be third place with Alibaba. Yep. So, it does. It kind of puts it in perspective. is a fleet of satellites and comms and a fleet of spacecraft, arguably very powerful, very important spacecraft, is that worth more than an endless field of oil derricks as far as the eye can see?
Yeah.
What does the future look like? I think that's an interesting question that probably needs a lot more analysis.
Yep, it does.
Yeah.
And speaking of analysis, let's bring in our guest. My good friend Shubber Lee is with us tonight. He's the CEO of Omnic.ai. He's the original Space Cynic, starting the Space Cynic blog back in 2006 with me and a couple other guys. And so we've been taking a cynical worldview of these things for a very long time, usually from the aspect of, we told you so. We're kind of hoping that now we'll at least look at things a little bit and ask and put some questions out there. Shubber is a great guy. I've known him for many, many years. He's a serial entrepreneur. When I first met him, he was working for a startup company down in Australia, and then he was a KPMG space sector thing for a while. He was with Accenture twice at two different times in his career, and he's done a whole bunch of other stuff in between. He can talk about that if he wants to, but I want to bring him in right now and talk about the $1 million. It's like the $1 trillion asteroid. It's the million satellite constellation.
But it's not going to happen. So we could finish there if you want.
Okay. See you next week, folks. Next on our show.
See you next week.
Because it's like, well, it is like the $1 trillion asteroid. It is kind of like
no. The $1 trillion asteroid is just people who don't understand economics,
right?
And that's a very different thing than. Yeah, Michael, no, that's okay. That reminds me. I'll have to come back to that. It reminds me of actually a study that I did for NASA on the commercialization of the space station, which was a one-slide answer, and they're like, "Nah, you got to make it a little bit longer than that." So I'll come back to that. But now I lost my train of thought. You did this to me, Michael, and I'm just getting started. So the difference between the $1 trillion asteroid or the quadrillion dollar asteroid, because I've seen that headline too, and the million satellites. Well, leaving aside the fact that they always pick a round number, like how can it possibly be a million, right? It's a million because it sounds like 1 million, right? But the reality is, if you just do the math, it makes no sense. And we'll get into that in a little bit. I mean, in terms of like launch and replenishment at the capacity of Starship, which is roughly 5 to 10x, depending on how you calculate it, to Falcon 9. And you look at the flight rate of Falcon 9 and Starship, which hasn't actually flown successfully yet for a mission. And then you put like 9 impossible things together in sequence, and you go, that's not going to happen in a way that justifies a $1.75 trillion IPO. It doesn't. Will it one day be worth that? Sure. Just like when those yahoos wrote that book, Dow 30,000, 25 years ago, and they're like, Dow 30,000. Everybody's like, are you kidding me? And then they were on the news when we finally hit 30,000 20 years later. And they're like, see, we told you. It's like, yeah, that's called inflation. That's not.
Yeah.
Like, I could write a book called Dow 3 million. And if we wait long enough, assuming we don't blow ourselves up, we'll get there.
Still true.
Right. But it'll be $2 million a gallon for gas.
Yeah. It doesn't happen. Right. So, but before we get into all the fun stuff, I want to go back to some of the things you guys covered while I was sitting on the side.
Yeah.
I wish I had a job as a futurist. Those people, I still remember back in the late 90s when I was at KPMG, we were doing the space stuff, and we put out with Space Fest and the Center for Space Commerce and one other group, and I apologize for missing their name. It was Mark Otterman's group, CSP Associates. We put out a study called The State of the Space Industry, and we did it every year. And it was like, this is how big the space industry is, and here's the different components of it, launch and satellite and ground stations and all that. And it was the only data that was out there because we were the original consultancy in that space. And then I still remember the Toffler group reached out to us and said, hey, we'd like to pick your brain on space stuff. And then like a year later, they come out with this big futurist study on space. And I'm like, you yahoos just took our information and wrote a crystal ball study. And people get paid for that. Yeah. So whatever. Anyway, so before we get there, some of the stuff you covered in the intro in the first half, I thought was really awesome. for anybody who doesn't know this, I actually looked it up while you were talking on IMDb, and I was not hallucinating, unlike an LLM. There was a show in 1979 with Andy Griffith called Salvage One.
Salvage.
And
Yeah.
Salvage One
I saw
was
that. Yeah.
about a guy who built a private rocket and was going up and collecting defunct satellites for scrap because he ran a junkyard. And it was oh, sorry, Sean. It was I'm like, for the longest time I thought that can't be real. I can't remember that show. That sounds so stupid. And then IMDb came into existence and I was able to prove it. So yeah. So that's one.
Right.
Now the sunlight at night thing, like there's so many things wrong with that. But at the core of it, like I mean, like, and you see the videos, but I saw one where some company was showing it on LinkedIn where they were illuminating the palm in Dubai with like this roving beam that was moving like crazy fast. And I'm like, what? Like the moon is a reflector, right? And you know how bright it is when the moon's out at full moon,
Right.
My solar panels don't charge. Who the hell is going to pay $5,000 an hour for these? I gotta say, whoever gives them money, like, please give them all your money and just get it out of your hands because you're too stupid to invest. Right? Just give it all to them. At least they'll put it back in the economy through spending.
Right.
So that's all I'm going to say about like reflector. And having studied astronomy and gone to an astronomy science camp when I was in high school, I think it is ludicrous. And yeah, seeing the stars at night actually really help us get a better place of where we are in the universe. And right now, in most places you live, you can't see the sky. You can't see stars.
Yeah.
So it's a shame. Anyway, so let's get back to the fun stuff. Data centers in space.
All right.
Where to begin?
Okay.
Where to begin?
Part 2.
All right. So I've taken some homework. By the way, Tom, I emailed you a couple of images. I don't know if I can share my screen from here, but I pulled up a talk that I gave. What was it? It was a Space Investment 3 Summit, which was a Space Investment Summit number 3, which was, what was that? 2001, 2002, somewhere around there.
2007.
Yeah.
We did the first one.
No, because I gave this talk before at a conference in Seattle.
Okay.
And it had to have been in like 99, 2000. But anyways, it was the value chain talk, right? So can I share my screen?
You can.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay, awesome. I'm going to share my screen for anybody who can see this.
That's not the atoms and electrons thing?
It is the atoms and electrons thing.
Okay. I don't have that handy.
I have it. Hold on.
Shubber, the rule is go ahead and share it, but you also have to describe it in words so folks on Spotify,
people
can still understand it.
Oh, it says I can't.
We have a larger audience audio than we have video. So
okay, well, I can't share my screen for some reason. It's not letting me do it. So I could try sharing screen, see if that works. Nope, it's not letting me share my screen. Okay, anyways, I'll describe it. So basically, for any of you who have ever like taken a strategy class, studied Michael Porter, whatever else, he had this concept he wrote a book about back in the 80s in his book Competitive Advantage, where he talked about the value chain of an industry. And the value chain is kind of goes from the start of like raw materials all the way to the end, which is the finished product with a consumer or with the business if you're B2B or B2C. So I developed a version of the value chain, which was the space industry value chain. And basically, if you looked at it, it was if you start with spaceports, and then you have launch vehicles, which launch out of these spaceports, and then you have satellite builders, and then you have satellite operators, and then you have value-added resellers who run things that are connected to those satellite that operate. Like you could be running programming over a channel over a DirecTV satellite, for instance, or you could be doing some other thing like you could be a company like Magellan or TomTom doing navigation using GPS satellites, right? So these are value-added resellers, and then you have the end consumer. And if you look at it, this parallels a construct that Negroponte out of MIT wrote a book about back in the mid-90s, where he talked about atoms and electrons, or bits and electrons, where things that are made out of stuff have a marginal cost. Things that are made out of electrons fundamentally don't. And so you can scale electrons much more easily than you can scale atoms. Yep. And it just makes a ton of sense. Like it
describes the world that we live in right now.
It describes the world we lived in right now. But even 30 years ago, it described the world we lived in. because things that were electron-based grew much more rapidly. Look at how fast internet companies grew because they were built on electrons versus companies that made things like cars, rockets, etc. So on the atom sides, you have places where you launch rockets, you have rockets, and you have satellites. Now, spaceports, a lot of people back in the 90s and early 2000s were talking about investing in spaceports. And I'm like, why the hell would you invest in a spaceport when a spaceport is a fixed location, with the exception of sea launch? And we'll come back to them because their crazy idea was, let's drag the spaceport to the equator, launch the rocket, and drag it back. And it was based in my hometown of Long Beach. And great idea for launching to GEO, but way too many other costs for expendable rockets. But kind of a little bit of the point. But a launch facility has no control on demand because demand happens at the other end of the value chain. A consumer wants something, and that consumer wants something will drive VARs to provide it, which will then drive them to find satellites that can provide the services that allow them to provide their services to the consumers. The satellite operators will then go to the satellite manufacturers and say, I need a Hughes 702 bus, or I need a Lockheed A2100, or I need a whatever, so I can provide these services as a satellite operator. I'm SES, or I'm Intelsat, or I'm Inmarsat, or whatever. And then you go from the satellite operators and they go, I need a ride. Let me go find a rocket. And they go and they find one of at that time 17 different expendable rocket companies out there. You know, you had Deltas, and you had Atlases, and you had Long Marches, and you had the Japanese H-2As, and you had the Israel rockets, and you had, you know, Ariane. You had a bunch of rocket providers. You had the Russians with their rockets, all expendable. And at the time, we said even being in the rocket business made no sense unless you built reusable. But nobody was building reusable because their business cases didn't rely on it. So that didn't get solved until Elon came along and said, you have to build reusable because the only way you can occupy Mars is to have lower cost of economics. And the only way to do that is to make the rocket reusable. It's like, duh, just like airplanes would be really expensive if you blew them up after every flight and you had to buy a new one for every flight because your ticket would cost you $2 million, right? That's not how it works. So Elon builds a reusable rocket. We know what happens. 5 years, they end up taking over 50% of the market share, and eventually most of the incumbents die off. The problem is the satellite business is two parts. One is you've got to actually put them up, and then you have to replenish them. So he's been putting up thousands of satellites, pretty awesome, Starlink, which he can only do because he controls the launch vehicle. Right. So he can charge himself wholesale. He can charge himself the cost of literally reflying the rocket, which is a lot cheaper than building a new one and launching it, which is what he charges other people. So when someone like, Philip comes along from StarCloud and says, I'm going to go build data centers in space, I'm like, really? On whose rocket? Because I can't see any of your competitors giving you wholesale. Right. So if you're paying retail to put satellites up in orbit, you don't have a business, right?
Right. And so the only game in town is still SpaceX and Blue Origin.
Cool. Yeah. Right. And all the other stuff he's got to do with it. So leave that aside. And by the way, I just for the record, one GPU in space is not a data center. One GPU is not even one U of a rack. Right. The average rack has 2 to 4 H100s in it in one U. In an entire rack, which you have 4 U, you could have 8. You could have actually in an entire rack, you could have 168 of these things. Right. So one GPU in space that ran an inference model. Okay.
It's a good stunt.
That's worth $40 million.
Great story.
Right.
Right. That's it. Right. It's a good stunt, and it's a useful story. And they raised $17 million on a white paper before they launched, and then they raised the additional afterwards.
And I heard,
and I want to know who these guys are. They're paying for it.
Then it turns out, in fact, yes, they do have a cooling problem because, oh, by the way, space is a vacuum; it's not cold, right? So we'll leave that for people to actually go look up the Stefan Boltzmann equation again to understand why putting something in space doesn't make it get really cold really fast, unless you can radiate the heat away. So let's talk about Starlink now, or not Starlink. Let's talk about SpaceX, right? So SpaceX has the rocket. They have the Starlink constellation, which was made possible with the rocket. And that's actually the thing that's generating cash for the business. It's generating about $8 billion, which is nothing to sneeze at, right? But xAI is losing about that much in running their AI centers, right? So basically, they're covering one with the other. I don't know how you value XAI $250 billion other than to say, I think it's worth $250 billion. And the same person, it's like, I think it's worth $250 billion. You're right. I think it's worth $250 billion. And they say to themselves, okay, let's value it.
Shubber, that is precisely how SpaceX jumped their number from 1.5 trillion to 1.75. It was a goddamn tweet. It was a single message that got a question mark. What if it was worth more? And Musk is like, yes. And that's how we got to.
Okay, so let's talk about this because, again, I think at some point it could be worth that. But finance is based on something really simple called discounted cash flows, net present value, boring stuff that MBAs talk about, right? And if you look at something and you say, what's the terminal value of this thing? Well, okay, if you're IPOing as 1.75 trillion right now, then either you're basing it on SpaceX's actual EBITDA, which is about 8 billion, give or take, which is what, a little over a 200 multiple on the company. Now you say, well, what's their forward cash flow going to be? Oh, it's going to be a lot because they're going to have AI in space and blah, blah, blah. Okay, let's start doing the numbers then, shall we? So how long would it take to launch 1 million satellites? Well, Jeff Bezos got his hand slapped by the FCC chair yesterday for that because he commented it would take centuries, which is also wrong. But he was being, again, I think, a little hyperbolic, and the FCC chair said, well, maybe you should first complete the constellation you signed up to that is nowhere near getting to the 1,000 satellites you need by July. So, you've got your own trouble, so don't worry about bothering Mr. Musk, which fair enough. It didn't actually address the problem, which is how long would it take? So, back of the envelope, you do the math and you say, okay, let's assume Starship has 5 times the capacity of the Falcon 9, right? Because it's anywhere from 25 tons to, 100 something tons, right? And they haven't flown a successful Starship in an operational capacity yet. So we don't know what the true capacity is. But let's just take 5 as the multiple. Okay. Falcon 9 had, was it 135 launches last year?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's say they do the same number of launches. And instead of carrying 27 satellites, now they're carrying, 200 satellites, which, assuming we know what one of these data center satellites would even look like, but assume it looks something like a Starlink satellite. And therefore they can somehow cram 200 into this thing, which doesn't really make sense, but okay, let's pretend they can. You've got 27,000 satellites launched in a year, right? How long does it take to launch 1 million satellites at 27,000 a year? Roughly 40 years. And that doesn't include replacement satellites because those satellites don't last 40 years. So now you have to say, okay, well, let's assume they last 5 years on average. So then you have to factor in the replenishment value as well. And you realize this thing's going to actually take 55 years to build. Okay, 55 years to build to get the whole thing that, data centers on the ground are going to get built in 3, 4, 5 years. And oh, by the way, we don't even know what chips they're going to put up, and they're going to have to put different generations of chips up. And by the way, none of these chips have been tested in space. And what happens the first time you have, a major solar event, which happens from time to time.
Right.
And it may not mess with all of them. And also you have just the regular high energy cosmic rays and other rays floating around out there that there's so many unknowns that to just say it's worth 1.75 trillion is just because the market's irrational. And fine. I would not say necessarily short it right now. I felt that way about other things, like when the space tourism company was like, "Oh, we're going to use a SPAC and go public." I'm like, "Oh, that's just a way to make money
right?
For people who short it," because we know. I mean, I was at the first X Prize flight when Burt Rutan flew the
Tom and I,
in Mojave, right?
Yeah.
And I still remember going to that and going, "Yeah, this is going to take a lot longer than they think."
Right.
And it's 2026, and how often are they flying tourists?
Right.
We talked about that last week and the week before, right?
Yeah.
Yes,
and I just want to say, for all those people who gave me shit when I said that Anusha Ansari going to space was great for her and will do nothing for space tourism, I was right and you were wrong. So shut the hell up.
I was right and you were wrong.
Before we go on, Walt Anderson joined us just now, and he had
hey,
a
Walt.
comment. Convection cooling does not work in space. There will not be enough. There it is. Not be enough data capacity to a space-based data center. Even a low launch cost or replacement launch will make that more expensive than a ground-based data center.
There's two things that they sound plausible to people who know nothing about physics or about space, but have heard about SpaceX. The two things they say are solar power is free. Oh, and the sun's a lot brighter in space. And two, it's really cold in space. They say these two things with a straight face, and investors are like, here,
Right,
take my money.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I actually really like Philip at Stark Cloud, so I'm gonna like defend him as a human for a second.
I have nothing against him as a human, and remember,
he walks down the street with a wheelbarrow, and people just put money into it because he's got so much credibility, and I mean, I do not know a better cultivated resume than that guy's resume. I just nobody I know has a resume like his resume. But I have asked him these questions directly. We've asked him on air. We don't understand what they're trying to do, and he actually said on our show that these Connex box type plans that he has been showing since day one on his white papers is not what he's going to do. He is going to make refrigerator sized systems, and that there is a little bit of sense in that. Like I can buy that argument. What's that?
How's he going to launch them?
So you brought that point up, and I don't think there's an answer to that one. I can't come up with an answer to that.
There's not an answer to that because unless he plans on buying or building a rocket company.
So I do have some total speculation, pure conjecture. But if Eric Schmidt and Relativity brings in the Google folks,
why wouldn't Google build
he's an acquisition target.
Well, okay.
He doesn't actually do any of this, but he winds up under the umbrella of a company that has $120 billion in cash and wondering what to do in space.
Yeah.
Like that is not unrealistic.
Right.
So he becomes an acquisition target, which would be a great ROI for the folks at Y Combinator. Right?
Which it would be. But so the problem I have is when you sell a story, if you don't actually believe in the story yourself, and you're like, I'm gonna hide the ball and I'm gonna go and do this because this is the thing that people are buzzing about, so I'm gonna do this and get it, then I'm gonna go do this thing, and it'll generate a return. I guess that works for some people.
I'm gonna not say what I was gonna say on air. I'll have that conversation off air. It may be the first time I've self-edited on this show. But,
oh God.
Yeah, no, I don't. I have a hunch it was never part of the plan to actually to build Connex boxes in space, shipping containers in space. It was a great video, got a lot of attention, but I don't think it was ever part of the plan. At least not in reality. But it was a great story, and the wheelbarrows of money turned into boxcars of money. So he was able to convince very smart people of that plan. And he's not the only one, but it is interesting. Your question about, how does he get 88,000 satellites to orbit if he's not the launch vehicle? If he doesn't have the launch vehicle, I don't know how he pulls it off. So I have for a while now thought that he was an acquisition target.
Well, that's the only thing. But then you have to ask yourself, what is being acquired, right? If it's the know-how to build a refrigerator that goes in space, I don't think it's as valuable as you think it is, because.
Well, I'm not saying it's. I don't think it justifies.
It doesn't justify the return. So if people invested $40 million on, say, a valuation of $120 million or whatever, right? I don't think someone's gonna buy it for 120 million because they could easily engineer the same thing. There's no IP that's magical in that, right? This is the thing. Like a lot of the AI companies out there right now, not ours because we do something very different. Where ours is based on computer vision and not just another LLM. But there are a lot of companies out there that have raised money that are nothing more than a wrapper to ChatGPT or Claude or one of those things, right? Well, there's nothing defensible in a wrapper. Most of those companies can be replicated by the next person who does the exact same thing. So there's like, it's the defensibility of your IP becomes the key thing. I'm not talking about patents either. I'm just talking about, can you build something that it's cheaper for me to buy you and get your know-how than it is for me to actually create the same know-how? And the answer is, I don't think there is anything there that's super magical.
Yeah. Now,
so go ahead.
Yeah,
go ahead,
well,
Tom.
I just want to we got a few minutes left. I want to circle back to the valuation again just a little bit because another piece of this puzzle is not just SpaceX; it's also XAI, which was just acquired and folded in as part of this overall package. And now XAI, for whatever it offers, I think of what I read, they only made 222 million last year, but they bled out 9.7 billion.
That's what I was saying.
What is he getting with this package?
Basically, everything SpaceX made in EBITDA through Starlink and their own business of launch was just set on fire by XAI with their operational costs.
Yeah. I just want to make sure that got in there.
Yeah, no, that's a huge point. It's a.
I do have some thoughts towards the rocket launch number as being kind of key to your equation, because I think they can build an awful lot of the. If you say that it's going to take 40 years to launch a million satellites,
that frequency with that volume, right? So here's the thing: you can pull a lever and see what changes. But let me ask you this: if Starlink is such a profitable thing, and they want to go from 9 million to say 40 million users, and they need to get a lot more satellites up, and let's leave aside the challenge with, it works great in open areas and rural areas and places like that. It doesn't work inside buildings yet. It doesn't it's not going to take on a lot of traditional telco. So it's not apples to apples. It's eating at the edges, which is fine. That's innovator's dilemma 101, right? It grabs that stuff, and rural people who've been struggling to get even like ISDN capability, all of a sudden they have broadband. It's awesome, right? Around the globe. You can get it in. You can get it on the front lines of Ukraine. You can get it in Mongolia. You can get it anywhere.
155 countries.
Okay. But if it was that simple, why doesn't SpaceX build 500 more Falcon 1 or Falcon 9s and put up 20,000 more next year? Because it still costs money to do that front end, right? They can refly them for a lot cheaper than it takes to fly them the first time. So they have to have a customer to fly the first one because that first one's still expensive, right? So it's not like they can just churn out 500 Starships, which, by the way, that would be a really bad idea since they don't work yet. But once they do, then they can start building them, and then they will do Block 2 and Block 3 and Block 4 and all that fun stuff. Again, I'm not saying it won't happen in some time. The economics just don't necessarily make sense for it. And they certainly don't make sense for the IPO tied to it.
Right. So will any of this discussion make a difference in the grand scheme of things, or the bleeding fiscal sheep?
Don Quixote, my friend, Don Quixote.
It sounds like the bleeding sheep at Citigroup and Morgan Stanley are all they're fired up to do this, and it doesn't matter what we say; they're going to do it anyway.
But so here's the part that really nobody talks about, because this whole AI data centers in space thing is a subset to a bigger conversation, which is why would people talk about putting them in space? It's because people are reacting negatively to them on the ground because of environmental costs, energy costs, all those other things. Okay, let's take that a step further though. What are all those data centers for that they're building? Well, in theory, because we need many more LLM instances running and all this stuff. But if you look at token costs, which is, again, like, I hate going numbers, but numbers are where this all matters. You look at token costs and you go, so many of these systems, whether it's Claude or Chat or anything else, are subsidizing the users because they're not actually they're paying for the difference between the cost of running the inference and the models versus the cost they can charge their users through VC and private equity money. And they're eating up more and more and more of that. Like if OpenAI was profitable, they wouldn't need SoftBank to borrow $40 billion.
Mm-hmm.
Like SoftBank sold their NVIDIA stake in order to get money so they could shovel more into OpenAI, right? Which hasn't turned a profit, right?
Right.
And so when the prices of actual tokens go up to reality, because they're heavily subsidized, I think you're going to find a lot less usage is going to come in, because all these people are like, oh, I'll just vibe code my way to success and I don't need all my programmers. I'm like, yeah, when your programmers are replaced with Claude, and Claude code suddenly costs 10x of what it cost last year, you're going to be going, where are my programmers who don't make these kinds of errors?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So anyways, it's a much bigger problem.
We gotta cut it. Doug, $9 billion a year and growing is actually not profitable.
Yeah.
It actually is not. That's the real answer.
So we gotta like cut it now, but 30 seconds. Shubber, give us your pitch for Omnic. What does Omnic do?
We're a totally different space. If you know anything about video games and esports and the rest, which is 10 times the size of Hollywood, it's one of the most viewed sports in the world. It's the number 2, actually, played all over the place, even outside of the US. We are the Bloomberg of esports. So we are the data AI company, came out of MIT, that analyzes everything that happens in a game and provides that data for all kinds of usages. That's what we do.
Wow. Okay. That's very cool. Okay. Shubber Lee, serial entrepreneur, gadfly, space cynic, always brings the receipts. Thank you so much for coming, and we'll have you again on real soon, I'm sure.
See you guys.
Okay. So Monday, Mary Glaz from Mission Space returns to us. She hasn't been on since last July, so this is it'll be good to have her back and talk about what they're doing over there. And that's what we have. We've had some great conversation on the sidelines over here tonight. My God, I've been reading that while Shubber's talking. It's amazing the commentaries coming up. All you guys that showed up tonight, thank you so much for coming. It's always great to have you, and that's what makes a really good show, is having guys like you come in. And so on that, for Michael Wayne and Sean Key, I remain Thomas Andrew Olson. Keep watching the skies.